The untamed wilderness holds secrets that challenge everything we thought we knew about survival and instinct. In a moment that left even seasoned wildlife experts speechless, a lone bear's encounter with a pack of wolves would rewrite the rules of nature itself. What happened next wasn't just unexpected, it was impossible, or so they thought. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The ancient forests of the Siberian taiga stretched endlessly. Beneath the steel-gray sky, where towering pines stood like silent sentinels guarding nature's most profound mysteries. The air hung heavy with the crisp scent of early winter, carrying whispers of the first frost on its breath. Through this primordial landscape, a massive grizzly bear moved with deliberate grace, its muscled form a testament to years of survival in one of Earth's most unforgiving environments. This was not the season for bears to roam so boldly. Most had already retreated to their dens, surrendering to winter's approaching grip. But this bear, a battle-scarred veteran of countless seasons, seemed to defy the natural order. Its dark eyes, sharp and alert, scanned the landscape with an intelligence that spoke of experience earned through years of navigating the delicate balance between predator and prey. The bear's massive paws pressed into the frost-kissed earth, leaving tracks that told a story of purpose rather than wandering. Each step was measured, intentional, as if drawn by some unseen force deeper into the heart of the wilderness. The weak autumn sun filtered through the canopy above, casting dappled shadows that danced across its thick fur, highlighting the silver streaks that marked its age. In the distance, a raven's call shattered the silence, its harsh cry echoing through the trees like a warning. The bear paused, its nostrils flaring as it tested the wind. Something had changed in the forest's rhythm, a subtle shift in the natural order that only the most seasoned creatures could detect. The birds had fallen silent, their morning songs replaced by an unnatural stillness that spoke of approaching danger. The wind shifted, carrying with it new scents, the musty odor of wet fur, the sharp tang of predator breath, and beneath it all, the unmistakable smell of hunger. The bear's muscles tensed beneath its thick coat, but it didn't alter its course. Instead, it continued forward, each step more deliberate than the last, as if accepting whatever challenge fate had placed in its path. Through the trees, shadows began to move, fluid and purposeful. They emerged like spirits from the mist, wolves, their lean bodies speaking of the harsh transition between seasons. This was not a random hunting party, but the notorious Shadow Pack, known throughout the region for their exceptional size and cunning. Their reputation among local trackers and researchers had become almost mythical, with stories of their strategic prowess passing from village to village. The lead wolf, a massive silver-backed male whose scars rivaled those of the bear, stepped forward. His amber eyes held none of the desperate hunger of common predators. Instead, they gleamed with calculated intelligence. Behind him, at least, 12 others moved into position, their coordinated movements speaking of years of hunting together. They were not merely a pack. They were a perfectly evolved hunting machine. The bear stood its ground, its presence commanding respect, even in the face of overwhelming odds. This was not the first time these ancient enemies had crossed paths, but something was different about this encounter. The air crackled with tension, yet neither predator made the first move to attack. It was as if both sides recognized that this moment would become something more than just another battle for survival. A low rumble emanated from the bear's throat, not a challenge or a threat, but something more complex, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of ages, of countless encounters between these two species throughout time. The wolves responded not with aggression, but with curious restraint, their usual hunting formation loosening slightly as they observed their unusual quarry. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath, the ancient pines creaking in the strengthening wind, as if they too were waiting to witness what would unfold. This was not merely a confrontation between predators. It was a moment that would challenge everything wildlife experts thought they knew about natural behavior and survival instincts. As the shadows lengthened and the weak autumn sun began its descent, the stage was set for an encounter that would become the stuff of legend among those who studied these magnificent creatures. But what happened next would prove that sometimes, in the midst of nature's most brutal realities, there exists a wisdom far deeper than mere survival. In the growing darkness, both bear and wolves remained locked in their unusual standoff. Each sighed, seeming to recognize that they stood on the threshold of something extraordinary. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the ancient secrets of the taiga, as if nature itself was preparing to reveal one of its most closely guarded mysteries. The tension in the forest clearing stretched like a drawn bowstring, ready to snap at any moment. The Shadowpack's hunters had maintained their positions, their disciplined formation speaking to years of coordinated hunting. Yet something in their usual routine had shifted, an imperceptible change that made this encounter different from any other hunt they had executed in their long reign over these woods. The silver-backed alpha, known among local trackers as Ghost, for his ability to appear and vanish like a spirit in the mist, took another calculated step forward. His movements carried none of the desperate urgency of a hungry predator. Instead, they held the measured precision of a chess master, each motion part of a larger strategy that had helped his pack survive countless harsh Siberian winters. Behind him, his mate Sierra, a wolf of unusual size and intelligence, watched. The bear with an intensity that went beyond mere predatory focus. Her dark amber eyes studied every subtle shift in the bear's posture, every minute change in its breathing. She had seen countless bears in their territory before, but this one was different. Its stance spoke not of fear or aggression, but of something far more intriguing, purpose. The bear remained still, its massive form like a mountain carved from flesh and bone. Local hunters had whispered tales of this particular grizzly for years, speaking in hushed tones of its extraordinary size and the distinctive silver streak that ran like lightning through its dark fur. They called it thunder, though not for its voice, rather for how the ground seemed to tremor with each of its deliberate steps. As the pack maintained their positions, a young wolf toward the back of the formation shifted uneasily. This was Spark, barely 2 seasons into his hunting years, his coat still carrying the lighter markings of youth. He had never participated in a bear hunt before, and the prolonged tension of this unusual standoff tested his trained discipline. A subtle growl from Sierra silenced his restlessness, her maternal authority keeping the younger pack members in check. The wind continued to whisper through the ancient pines, carrying with it the sense of the deepening autumn. Fallen leaves skittered across the frost-hardened ground between predator and prey, their rustle the only sound breaking the profound silence that had descended over the clearing. Even the ravens, usually eager spectators to any potential conflict, had fallen silent in their perches high above. Thunder's dark eyes moved methodically from wolf to wolf, acknowledging each one as an individual rather than simply part of the hunting party. This was not the frantic assessment of prey-seeking escape routes, but rather the calculated observation of a warrior sizing up worthy opponents. The bear's breath came slow and steady, creating small clouds in the cooling air that spoke of patience rather than fear. Ghost took another step forward, and for the first time a low rumble emerged from Thunder's throat. It wasn't the typical aggressive roar that bears use to ward off threats. Instead, it carried a different quality, almost like communication. The sound seemed to resonate with something ancient and instinctual in the wolves, causing several of them to cock their heads in curiosity. Sierra moved forward to stand beside her mate, her movements fluid and graceful despite her impressive size. Together, they presented a unified front of leadership that had guided their pack through countless challenges. But now, facing this unusual bear, their usual hunting protocols seemed inadequate. This was not a confrontation that could be resolved through their typical strategies. The pack's formation subtly shifted, responding to unspoken signals from their leaders. Two younger wolves, Storm and Shadow, moved to flank the clearing's edges, not in preparation for attack, but rather establishing a more complex arrangement. Their movement spoke of intelligence rather than aggression, as if this encounter had evolved into something more nuanced than a simple hunt. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Thunder watched these adjustments with evident awareness, its keen intelligence showing in how it responded to each subtle change in the pack's positioning. The bear's own posture shifted slightly, not to prepare for combat, but rather to better observe the wolves' movements. This was not the behavior of typical prey, nor even of a predator defending its territory. There was purpose here, intelligence. That went beyond mere instinct. As the afternoon light began to fade, casting long shadows through the trees, the standoff continued to evolve. The initial tension had transformed into something more complex, a sort of unspoken dialogue between species that defied conventional understanding of predator-prey relationships. The wolves' hunting formation had loosened further, taking on an almost ceremonial quality rather than a tactical one. From his position near the back of the pack, Spark observed with growing fascination. His young mind, not yet fully conditioned to the rigid protocols of wolf hunting, was perhaps more open to seeing the extraordinary nature of this encounter. He watched as Ghost and Sierra continued their careful assessment of the bear, noting how their usual aggressive hunting behavior had been replaced by something that almost resembled curiosity. A distant call echoed through the forest, another wolf pack marking their territory far to the north. The Shadow Pack's members twitched their ears at the sound but maintained their positions. Their focus remained entirely on the unusual scene, unfolding before them, as if instinctively recognizing that they were participants in something unprecedented. Thunder's attention shifted briefly toward the distant howls, before returning to the pack before him. The bear's response highlighted another peculiarity of this encounter. Its movements were not those of a solitary creature, but rather demonstrated an awareness of broader territorial dynamics that usually only pack animals possessed. It was as if the bear understood not just the immediate threat before it, but the larger patterns of power and territory that shaped life in these woods. The forest around them had grown unusually still, as if nature itself was holding its breath to witness this extraordinary moment. The usual background chorus of bird calls and small animal movements had ceased, creating an amphitheater of silence in which this unusual drama could unfold. Even the wind seemed to have died down, leaving the air heavy with anticipation. Ghost took another step forward, bringing him within striking distance of the bear. In any other situation, this would have been the moment when violence erupted, when the age-old dance of predator and prey reached its bloody conclusion. But instead, something entirely different occurred. The alpha wolf lowered his head slightly, not in submission, but in what appeared to be recognition. Thunder responded with a subtle shift in posture, its massive head dipping in a mirror of the wolf's gesture. This was not the behavior of animals following their basic instincts. This was something else entirely, a display of intelligence and awareness that challenged everything known about wildlife behavior. The bear and wolf, ancient enemies by nature's design, appeared to be engaging in something that resembled communication. Sierra moved forward to join her mate, her own posture, reflecting the same unusual combination of alertness and restraint. The rest of the pack remained in their positions, but their stances had softened, the aggressive energy of the hunt giving way to something more akin to curiosity. Even young Spark had settled into a calm alertness, his earlier nervousness replaced by rapt attention, as the last rays of sunlight filtered through the trees, casting an almost ethereal glow over the clearing. The scene had transformed completely from its initial confrontational beginning. What had started as a potential battle for survival had evolved into something that would have stunned any wildlife expert fortunate enough to witness it. This was not just an unusual encounter between predator and prey. It was a moment that challenged fundamental assumptions about animal behavior and intelligence. The bear and wolves remained locked in their extraordinary interaction, each side seeming to recognize that they were participants in something that transcended their usual roles in the natural order. This was not just about survival anymore. It was about something deeper, something that spoke to the hidden complexities of life in the wilderness. As twilight deepened in the ancient forest, a remarkable transformation began to unfold. The Shadow Pack's formation, once rigid with predatory intent, had evolved into something entirely different. Ghost and Sierra, the alpha pair, stood at the forefront of their pack, their postures conveying a wisdom that went beyond mere hunting instinct. Behind them, their pack members watched with rapt attention as history rewrote itself in their presence. Thunder, the massive grizzly, shifted, its weight with deliberate care. The bear's movements spoke of years navigating the complex dynamics of survival in these harsh lands. But now, something unprecedented was occurring. The bear's dark eyes held not the desperate light of cornered prey, but the calculated awareness of a being who had chosen this encounter. From his position in the pack, young Spark observed a sight few wolves had ever witnessed. The tension that had initially charged the air had transformed into something electric with possibility. The young wolf's keen senses detected subtle changes in his packmates' behavior, the way their muscles had relaxed from their hunting postures, how their breathing had synchronized in this moment of shared discovery. A gust of wind swept through the clearing, carrying with it the sense of approaching night. The cold air swirled around the assembled creatures, but none moved from their positions. This was no longer a standoff between predator and prey. It had become something far more significant, a moment of recognition between intelligent beings who had perhaps more in common than nature had intended. Sierra took a careful step forward, her movements fluid and purposeful. The female alpha's behavior displayed none of the aggressive posturing typical of confrontations with bears. Instead, her approach carried an almost diplomatic quality, as if she were an ambassador bridging the gap between two different worlds. Ghost watched his mate with evident trust, his own posture reflecting support for this unprecedented interaction. Thunder responded to Sierra's approach with remarkable restraint, the bear's massive head lowered slightly, not in submission, but in acknowledgement. This subtle gesture sent ripples of reaction through the watching pack. Storm and Shadow, the flanking wolves, exchanged glances that seemed to contain volumes of unspoken communication. Even the most seasoned members of the pack had never witnessed anything like this. The forest around them had become unnaturally quiet, as if nature itself was holding its breath to witness this extraordinary moment. The ancient pines stood like silent guardians, their shadows lengthening as the day faded into dusk. High above, the first stars began to peek through breaks in the clouds, their cold light illuminating the scene below. Something in Thunder's demeanor had changed, a subtle shift that spoke of decision rather than reaction. The bear's eyes, reflecting the growing starlight, held a depth of intelligence that challenged everything known about wildlife behavior. This was not just a creature fighting for survival. This was a being making conscious choices about its interaction with traditional enemies. The pack's younger members, led by Spark's example, had begun to show signs of understanding that transcended their training. Their usual hunting excitement had been replaced by a focused attention that spoke of learning rather than anticipating. Violence. They were witnessing something that would reshape their understanding of their place in the forest's hierarchy. Ghost moved forward to join Sierra, the alpha pair now standing as equals before the massive bear. Their combined presence created a picture that defied natural law. Wolves and bear, predator and prey, standing in a moment of mutual recognition that spoke of possibilities beyond mere survival. The rest of the pack adjusted their positions, accordingly maintaining their formation but with a new purpose. Thunder's breath came out in steady clouds in the cooling air, each exhale measured and calm. The bear's posture had shifted from defensive readiness to something that almost resembled curiosity. Its massive paws, capable of delivering devastating blows, remained planted firmly but peacefully on the forest floor. This was strength being used not for dominance, but for something far more revolutionary. The clearing had become an arena of transformation, where age-old enemies were discovering new ways of interaction. The wolves' traditional hunting patterns had given way to a form of communication that transcended species barriers. Each subtle movement, each careful gesture, added to a dialogue that no wildlife expert had ever documented. Storm and Shadow, the pack's most experienced hunters after the alphas, had begun to display signs of understanding that went beyond their training. Their movements mirrored the careful diplomacy of their leaders, showing how quickly intelligent creatures could adapt to new possibilities. Their behavior would have shocked any observer who believed that wildlife was limited by rigid, instinctual patterns. The wind continued to whisper through the trees, but its sound now seemed to carry a different message. Instead of the tension of impending conflict, it spoke of change, of boundaries being redrawn, of new understandings being forged in the heart of the wilderness. The forest itself seemed to be acknowledging the significance of what was unfolding in this hidden clearing. As night continued to descend, the extraordinary scene took on an almost mythical quality. The starlight filtering through the canopy cast shifting patterns across the assembled creatures, highlighting the unusual harmony of their gathering. What had begun as a potential conflict had evolved into something that would challenge fundamental assumptions about wildlife behavior. Thunder's presence had become almost magnetic, drawing the attention of every wolf in the pack. The bear's calm strength seemed to radiate outward, creating a field of influence that affected even the most skeptical members of the shadow pack. This was leadership of a different kind, not the dominance of physical power, but the authority of wisdom and experience. Sierra and Ghost maintained their position at the forefront of their pack, their body language conveying a complex mixture of authority and openness. They had guided their pack through countless challenges, but this situation called for a different kind of leadership. Their ability to adapt, to recognize the extraordinary nature of this encounter, showed why they had succeeded where other alphas had failed. The younger wolves, particularly Spark, were witnessing a masterclass in adaptation and intelligence. Their usual training emphasized the rules of the hunt, the importance of coordination and aggression when needed. But here they were learning something far more valuable, the possibility of finding new ways to interact with the world around them. As the night air grew colder, the assembly of creatures remained locked in their extraordinary interaction. The clearing had become a classroom of sorts, where traditional roles were being redefined and new possibilities were being explored. Each passing moment seemed to strengthen the bridge being built between these ancient enemies. The forest's shadows deepened, but the awareness in Thunder's eyes remained sharp and clear. The bear's behavior continued to demonstrate a level of intelligence that went beyond mere instinct. This was conscious choice, deliberate action, the kind of decision-making that scientists had long debated whether wild animals were capable of displaying. The pack's formation had evolved into something that resembled more of a gathering than a hunting party. Each wolf had found its place in this new arrangement, contributing to a picture that would have been impossible to predict. At the beginning of their encounter, their collective behavior spoke of adaptation, of the ability to recognize and respond to extraordinary circumstances. As the extraordinary encounter continued to unfold, Thunder made a movement that caught the entire pack by surprise. The massive bear slowly lowered itself to a sitting position, a gesture that defied every natural instinct of both predator and prey. This deliberate display of vulnerability from such a powerful creature sent ripples of astonishment through the watching wolves. It was an action that spoke volumes about trust and intelligence, challenging the very foundations of wild animal behavior. Ghost and Sierra exchanged glances, their years of shared leadership evident in their wordless communication. The alpha pair had guided their pack through countless hunts and challenges, but this situation called for a different kind of wisdom. Sierra was the first to respond, lowering herself to a relaxed position that mirrored Thunder's gesture. Her actions sparked a cascade of responses through the pack. Young Spark, watching from his position, felt something shift in his understanding of the world. The rigid rules of predator and prey that had been ingrained in him since birth were being rewritten before his eyes. He observed how Storm and Shadow, the pack's veteran hunters, gradually relaxed their defensive stances, their experienced eyes showing a mix of curiosity and newfound respect. The night air carried stories of change through the ancient forest. High above, the aurora borealis began to dance across the sky, casting ethereal colors that painted the scene in surreal hues of green and purple. It was as if nature itself was celebrating this unprecedented moment of harmony between ancient adversaries. Thunder's dark eyes reflected the celestial light show, giving them an almost mystical quality. The bear's massive form, now settled comfortably in the clearing, seemed to radiate a presence that transcended physical size. This was not just about strength anymore. It was about wisdom, about finding new ways to exist in a world that often demanded violence for survival. The Shadow Pack's members had begun to arrange themselves in a loose semicircle, maintaining a respectful distance but showing none of their earlier aggression. Even the most cautious among them had picked up on the historic significance of this moment. This was not just an unusual encounter. It was a lesson in the possibilities that existed beyond traditional boundaries. A distant wolf howl echoed through the trees, carrying news of another pack's successful hunt. The Shadow Pack's ears twitched at the sound, but their attention remained fixed on the scene unfolding before them. They were part of something far more significant than a mere hunt. They were witnesses to a transformation in the very nature of wilderness relationships. Thunder's breathing had settled into a steady rhythm that seemed to synchronize with the collective breath of the wolf pack. The bear's posture, though relaxed, maintained a dignity that commanded respect. This was not submission, but rather a demonstration of strength through peace, a concept that challenged everything known about wild animal behavior. Sierra, ever the intuitive leader, had begun to edge closer to the bear, her movements slow and deliberate. Ghost watched with unwavering attention, ready to support his mate, but trusting her judgment completely. The female alpha's approach was not that of a predator testing prey, but rather of one intelligent being acknowledging another. The younger wolves, particularly Spark, were absorbing every detail of this unprecedented interaction. Their usual training emphasized the importance of maintaining aggressive dominance, but here they were witnessing a different kind of power, the strength that came from choosing peace over conflict, understanding over instinct. A cool breeze rustled through the clearing, carrying with it the sense of the changing season. Autumn was deepening into winter, a time when survival typically became more desperate and territorial boundaries more fiercely defended. Yet here, in this hidden corner of the wilderness, traditional rules were being rewritten. Thunder's massive paws, capable of delivering devastating force, remained relaxed against the forest floor. The bear's calm demeanor seemed to project an energy that affected everyone in the clearing. Even the most skeptical members of the pack had begun to understand that they were participating in something revolutionary. The aurora's lights continued to dance overhead, creating an otherworldly atmosphere that matched the extraordinary nature of the gathering below. The celestial display seemed to emphasize the magical quality of what was unfolding, a moment when the natural order was not being violated, but rather expanded to include new possibilities. Ghost had maintained his position of leadership, but his usual commanding presence had softened into something more contemplative. The alpha male's experience had taught him when to assert dominance and when to allow situations to develop naturally. This was clearly a time for the latter, as traditional pack dynamics gave way to something more profound. Storm and Shadow, the pack's seasoned hunters, had positioned themselves where they could both protect their younger packmates and observe this unprecedented interaction. Their behavior demonstrated how experience could lead to wisdom, the understanding that not every encounter needed to end in conflict. As the night deepened, the clearing had become a sanctuary of sorts, where age-old enemies had found a way to coexist peacefully. The usual sounds of the forest had resumed, but with a different quality, less tension, more harmony. It was as if the wilderness itself was adapting to this new possibility. Thunder's presence continued to command attention, but not through fear or aggression. The bear had become a teacher of sorts, demonstrating through its actions that strength could be expressed through restraint, that power could be used to create understanding rather than dominance. The Shadow Pack's formation had evolved into something that resembled more of a gathering than a hunting party. Each wolf had found its place in this new arrangement, contributing to a picture that would have been impossible to predict at the beginning of their encounter. Their collective behavior spoke of adaptation, of the ability to recognize and respond to extraordinary circumstances. Sierra's careful approach had brought her within a few feet of Thunder, a distance that would normally be unthinkable between wolf and bear. The female alpha's body language conveyed a complex mixture of respect and curiosity. This was diplomacy in its purest form, taking place in the heart of the wilderness. The younger wolves, led by Spark's example, had begun to show signs of understanding that transcended their training. Their usual hunting excitement had been replaced by a focused attention that spoke of learning rather than anticipating violence. They were witnessing something that would reshape their understanding of their place in the forest's hierarchy. As the aurora continued its celestial dance overhead, the assembled creatures remained locked in their extraordinary interaction. The clearing had become a classroom of sorts, where traditional roles were being redefined and new possibilities were being explored. Each passing moment seemed to strengthen the bridge being built between these ancient enemies. The forest's shadows deepened, but the awareness in Thunder's eyes remained sharp and clear. The bear's behavior continued to demonstrate a level of intelligence that went beyond mere instinct. This was conscious choice, deliberate action, the kind of decision-making that scientists had long debated whether wild animals were capable of displaying. A sudden change in the wind brought new scents to the clearing, causing every creature to stiffen with alertness. Through the trees came the unmistakable sounds of approaching danger. Another predator group was entering their territory. Thunder's ears twitched forward, detecting what the wolves had already sensed. A rival pack, larger and more aggressive than the Shadow Pack, was drawing near. The newcomers were the notorious Frost Pack, known throughout the region for their ruthless hunting tactics and territorial aggression. Their reputation preceded them. Stories told of how they had driven other wolves from their hunting grounds, showing no mercy to those who stood in their way. Their approach now threatened to shatter the extraordinary peace that had formed in the clearing. Ghost and Sierra immediately stood, their bodies tensing as they assessed this new threat. Their pack members shifted positions, instinctively moving into a defensive formation. But something unexpected happened. Instead of taking advantage of this distraction to escape, Thunder rose to its full height and moved closer to the Shadow Pack, positioning itself alongside them. The massive bear's movement was deliberate, its intention clear. This was not the action of a creature seeking protection, but rather one offering strength in alliance. Thunder's presence transformed the Shadow Pack's defensive line into something more formidable, creating a united front that would give even the most aggressive challengers pause. Through the trees, the frost pack emerged, 20 strong, their white-grey coats ghostly in the aurora's light. Their leader, a scarred brute known as Steel, halted at the edge of the clearing. The sight that greeted him was unlike anything he had encountered in his years of dominating these woods. A bear and wolf pack standing as one, their combined presence radiating a power that transcended ordinary territorial disputes. Young Spark, now positioned between storm and shadow, felt his fear give way to something stronger. The presence of thunder beside them had changed everything. This was no longer about survival alone. It was about standing together against tyranny, about defending something greater than individual interests. Steele's confusion was evident in his hesitation. His pack had never failed to intimidate their opponents into submission, yet here they faced resistance of an unprecedented nature. The bear and wolf alliance before him challenged everything he understood about power and dominance in the wilderness. Thunder's deep growl resonated through the clearing, not in threat, but in warning. The sound carried wisdom earned through countless seasons, speaking of strength that came not from aggression but from unity. The Shadow Pack added their voices, creating a harmony that seemed to make the very air vibrate with shared purpose. The Frost Pack's members shifted uneasily, their usual confidence wavering in the face of this extraordinary alliance. They had come expecting to find easy prey or weak opponents, not this display of unified strength. Steele's authority, built on fear and aggression, suddenly seemed hollow compared to the genuine power before him. Sierra stepped forward, her presence matching Thunder's in quiet authority. Her message was clear. This territory would not fall to bullying or brute force. Behind her, Ghost maintained the pack's formation, their synchronized movements speaking of a coordination that went beyond mere hunting tactics. The aurora's lights painted the scene in surreal colors, highlighting the stark contrast between the two approaches to power. On one side stood the Frost Pack, their strength built on intimidation and violence. On the other, the unlikely alliance of bear and wolves demonstrated something far more powerful, the strength that comes from choosing cooperation over conflict. Steele made a tentative move forward, testing the resolve of this unusual alliance. Thunder's response was immediate, not an attack, but rather a step that placed the bear squarely beside Sierra, presenting a united leadership that defied natural law. The message was unmistakable. Any challenge would be met with combined resistance. The tension in the clearing reached its peak as Steele faced a decision that would reshape the power dynamics of the entire region. His pack waited for his signal, their bodies tense with anticipation, but the sight before them had shaken their blind faith in domination through force. Young Spark watched as history pivoted on this moment. The teachings of his youth about survival through strength alone were being replaced by a new understanding. True power, he was learning, came not from the ability to intimidate, but from the wisdom to find strength in unlikely allies. Thunder's presence beside the Shadow Pack had created something entirely new in the wilderness. A demonstration that traditional boundaries could be transcended when beings chose to recognize the strength in each other, rather than focusing on their differences. This was evolution in action, not through physical adaptation, but through behavioral transformation. Steele's decision came not with a dramatic charge or aggressive display, but rather with a slow step backward. His retreat was not one of fear, but of recognition, an acknowledgement that he faced something more powerful than mere physical strength. The Frost Pack's members followed their leader's lead, melting back into the forest as silently as they. had appeared. The clearing fell quiet once more, but the atmosphere had changed. What had begun as an extraordinary encounter between traditional enemies had evolved into something even more remarkable, a demonstration of how unity could overcome raw aggression, how wisdom could triumph over brute force. Thunder remained beside the shadow pack, its massive form a testament to the power of choosing alliance over animosity. The bear's decision to stand with the wolves rather than take advantage of their distraction spoke of an intelligence that went far beyond instinct. This was conscious choice, deliberate action in defiance of natural law. Sierra and Ghost moved to acknowledge their unlikely ally, their gestures carrying a depth of gratitude and respect that transcended species boundaries. The rest of the pack followed suit, their behavior demonstrating an understanding that their world had changed fundamentally. They had witnessed and participated in something that challenged every assumption about wildlife behavior. As the aurora continued its dance overhead, the clearing had become more than just a location in the wilderness. It was now a symbol of possibility, a place where the rules of nature had not been broken, but rather expanded to include new ways of existence. The alliance between bear and wolves had not just prevented violence, it had created a new template for survival. Young Spark's world had been transformed by what he had witnessed. The lessons of this night would shape not just his understanding of survival, but his entire approach to life in the wilderness. Power, he had learned, could take many forms, and the strongest bonds often came from the most unexpected connections. The forest around them seemed to pulse with the energy of transformation, as if the very air had been charged by the significance of what had transpired. This was more than just an unusual encounter or a temporary alliance. It was a fundamental shift in the dynamics of wilderness life, a demonstration that even in nature's harshest realm there was room for evolution beyond the ancient laws of tooth and claw. In the aftermath of the Frostpack's retreat, the forest seemed to exhale collectively, as if releasing the tension that had built during the confrontation. But rather than dispersing, Thunder and the Shadow Pack remained together, their unlikely alliance having evolved into something even more remarkable. The aurora's ethereal light continued to paint the scene, casting an almost mystical glow over what was about to unfold. Storm, one of the pack's most experienced hunters, was the first to notice something unusual in Thunder's behavior. The massive bear had begun to move with purpose, not away from the pack, but in a specific direction, occasionally looking back as if expecting the wolves to follow. Sierra, with her keen intuition, recognized this was not random movement. Thunder was trying to communicate something important. Ghost exchanged a meaningful look with his mate, and together they made a decision that would once again challenge natural law. With a subtle signal to their pack, they began to follow the bear. Young Spark, his eyes bright with curiosity, observed how Thunder would pause periodically, ensuring the pack was still following, leading them deeper into territory that none of them had explored before. As they traveled through the night-shrouded forest, the wolves began to notice changes in their surroundings. The trees here were older, their massive trunks bearing the scars of centuries. The ground beneath their paws felt different, somehow, more alive with ancient energy. Thunder moved with increasing urgency, yet maintained a pace that allowed the pack to stay close. The journey led them to a hidden valley, one that had somehow remained undiscovered by both the Shadow Pack and their rivals. Here, The aurora's light seemed to pool like liquid color, illuminating a landscape that took their breath away. A pristine stream cut through the center, its waters crystal clear even in the dim light. The slopes were rich with berry bushes, and the air carried the scent of numerous prey animals. But it wasn't just the abundance of resources that made this place special. As Thunder led them further into the valley, they discovered a network of caves set into the valley walls, perfect for winter dens, defensible and warm. The bear's intention became clear. This wasn't just a temporary sanctuary, this was a gift, a new home territory far superior to their current hunting grounds. Sierra moved forward to stand beside Thunder, her expression showing understanding and gratitude. This hidden valley wasn't just a safe haven from aggressive rivals like the Frost Pack. It was a place where their unprecedented alliance could continue to grow and evolve. The bear had chosen to share something invaluable, demonstrating a level of altruism that scientists would have deemed impossible. Young Spark bounded forward, his youthful energy barely contained as he explored the new territory. His excitement was contagious, and soon other pack members began to investigate their surroundings, their movements showing increasing appreciation for what Thunder had revealed to them. The valley offered everything a wolf pack needed to thrive, and more. Ghost organized several pack members into scouting groups, their experienced eyes confirming what was already apparent. This territory was far richer than anything they had known before. The abundance of prey, water, and shelter meant they would no longer need to engage in dangerous territorial disputes with other packs. Thunder had given them not just a new home, but a future free from the constant struggle for survival. As the night deepened, Thunder led them to a particular cave, larger than the others. Inside, the pack discovered evidence that this was the bear's own den, a place of safety and rest that had been used for many seasons. The gesture was clear. Thunder was not just sharing territory, but offering to make this alliance permanent, suggesting a new way of coexistence that would benefit both bear and wolves. Storm and Shadow, the pack's veteran hunters, recognized the strategic value of this arrangement. Working together, bear and wolves could protect this territory far more effectively than either could alone. Their combined presence would deter any rivals, while their different hunting styles would ensure the prey population remained balanced and healthy. The aurora's light seemed to intensify as the pack explored their new home, its colors reflecting off the stream and creating patterns that danced across the valley walls. It was as if nature itself was celebrating this unprecedented partnership, this evolution beyond the traditional boundaries of species rivalry. Thunder moved through the valley with the confidence of one who knew every tree and stone, showing the wolves hidden springs, the best hunting trails, and safe dens for the coming winter. Each revelation demonstrated not just the bear's intelligence, but a capacity for planning and foresight that challenged every assumption about wildlife behavior. Young Spark, watching Thunder interact with his pack leaders, felt his understanding of the world expanding with every moment. The rigid divisions between species that he had been taught to accept were dissolving, replaced by a new vision of what was possible when beings chose to overcome their traditional limitations. Sierra and Ghost began organizing the pack for their permanent move to the valley. Their coordinated efforts showed how quickly they had adapted to this new reality, their leadership evolving to encompass not just their own pack, but this groundbreaking partnership with Thunder. Their behavior demonstrated that true wisdom lay in recognizing and embracing unprecedented opportunities. As dawn approached, The first rays of sun began to paint the eastern sky, but the aurora remained visible, its ethereal light now mixing with the growing daylight to create an almost magical atmosphere. The valley seemed to glow with possibility, its hidden wonders still revealing themselves to its new inhabitants. Thunder's decision to share this sanctuary represented something profound, a recognition that survival didn't have to mean constant competition. By choosing to ally with former enemies, by sharing resources rather than fighting over them, the bear had demonstrated a truth that went beyond the wilderness. The greatest strength often came from working together rather than standing alone. The Shadow Pack members had settled into exploring their new territory, their movements showing increasing confidence and comfort. What had begun as an extraordinary encounter between traditional enemies had evolved into something even more remarkable. A permanent alliance that would reshape the dynamics of life in this part of the wilderness. Young Spark had found a high point in the valley where he could observe everything unfolding below. His keen eyes took in the scene, his packmates working together to establish their new home, Thunder moving among them with peaceful purpose, the rich landscape that promised a future free from the constant struggle for survival. This was more than just a new territory. It was a new way of existing in the wilderness. The morning light continued to grow stronger, but instead of seeking shelter for the day, the pack remained active, too energized by their discovery to rest. Thunder's presence among them had become natural, the massive bear's movements harmonizing with those of the wolves as if they had always been meant to work together. Sierra and Ghost had begun marking the territory's boundaries, but their scent marking had a different quality than usual, less aggressive, more welcoming. It was as if they understood that this place was meant to be something different, not just a defended territory, but a sanctuary where new forms of cooperation could flourish. Thunder's gift of this hidden valley had done more than ensure the pack's survival. It had created a space where the rules of nature could be rewritten, where traditional enemies could become allies, and where the true potential of wildlife intelligence could be realized. This was evolution in its highest form, not just physical adaptation, but the development of new ways of thinking and existing. As the first week in the Hidden Valley unfolded, the alliance between Thunder and the Shadow Pack began to reveal unexpected depths. One crisp morning, Storm discovered something remarkable while patrolling with Spark. A herd of injured elk had sought refuge in a secluded meadow within their territory. Several of the elk, including young calves, were struggling with wounds that appeared to have been inflicted by the Frost Pack's ruthless hunting tactics. Instead of seeing an easy meal, something extraordinary occurred. Thunder, who had been observing from nearby, approached the injured elk with surprising gentleness. The bear's behavior sparked a remarkable chain of events that would further challenge everything known about wildlife behavior. Rather than fleeing in terror, the elk seemed to sense something different about this unusual pair of predators. Sierra, watching from the ridge above, made a decision that would add another chapter to their evolving story. With subtle signals, she directed the pack to form a protective perimeter around the meadow. Their presence, rather than inspiring fear, began to create a sense of security. The injured elk, too weak to flee, gradually seemed to understand that these traditional predators were offering protection rather than threat. Young Spark watched in amazement as Thunder demonstrated an unexpected knowledge of healing plants, carefully selecting specific herbs growing along the meadow's edge. The bear's actions showed an intelligence that went beyond mere instinct. This was accumulated wisdom being put to unexpected use. The wolves, following Thunder's example, began to understand that power could be expressed through protection rather than predation. Over the next few days, an unprecedented scene unfolded in the hidden valley. The Shadow Pack members took turns standing guard while the injured elk recovered their strength. Thunder's knowledge of medicinal plants, shared through example, began to influence the wolves' understanding of their environment. They were learning that the forest offered more than just prey. It provided solutions and sustenance in unexpected forms. Ghost, ever the strategic thinker, recognized the broader implications of this situation. By protecting these injured elk, they were not just demonstrating unprecedented behavior, they were investing in the future health of their territory. The elk would remember this treatment, and their presence would attract other herds, ensuring a sustainable future for all inhabitants of the valley. The news of this extraordinary situation began to spread through the forest's complex communication networks. Birds carried the story far and wide, their songs speaking of predators who had chosen to protect rather than hunt. Other animals began to take notice, gradually approaching the valley with curiosity rather than fear. One misty morning, the valley received unexpected visitors. A small group of wolves from the Frost Pack, young ones who had grown disillusioned with Steel's brutal leadership. They had heard the stories and come to witness this remarkable alliance for themselves. Their arrival presented a crucial test of the new principles being established in the valley. Thunder and the Shadow Pack faced a choice: maintain their exclusive sanctuary or demonstrate that their evolution extended to accepting former enemies. Que la corruption ne prospère que lorsque les gens détournent le regard. Grâce au réseau de contacts qui lui reste, les rapports continuent d'affluer sur l'impact de son opération. Le témoignage du colonel avait mis au jour une corruption qui s'étendait à des endroits inattendus, chaque révélation déclenchant de nouvelles enquêtes, de nouvelles commissions, de nouvelles réformes. J'ai obtenu quelque chose d'intéressant de la part de la surveillance fédérale, dit Lisa en produisant un dossier. Vous vous souvenez des schémas que vous avez identifiés au cours de votre surveillance? Des opérations similaires ont été fermées dans le monde entier. Vos méthodes créent un effet domino. À l'extérieur, le port était animé par l'activité matinale, mais différemment aujourd'hui. Là où Thomas surveillait les menaces et les positions tactiques, il voit des signes de prise de conscience de la communauté. Des commerçants partageant des informations, des citoyens signalant des activités suspectes, un réseau d'observateurs silencieux protégeant leur maison. Un autre développement que vous devriez connaître, poursuit Lisa. Ces programmes d'aide légitime que vous avez identifiés, ils sont en train d'être complètement restructurés. Nouvelle surveillance, nouveaux protocoles. Elle a étudié sa réaction. Il recherche quelqu'un qui comprenne à la fois l'aspect opérationnel et l'importance de la transparence. Thomas hausse un sourcil. Vous essayez toujours de me donner une nouvelle mission? Plutôt de reconnaître que vos compétences pourraient faire plus que dénoncer la corruption. Elle fit un geste vers le port transformé. Vous avez passé 12 ans à apprendre tous les aspects de leur fonctionnement. Pourquoi ne pas utiliser ces connaissances pour aider à construire quelque chose de légitime? Sarah se joint à la conversation. Le magasin pourrait aussi rester ouvert, de vrais livres cette fois-ci, pas seulement une couverture pour la surveillance. La communauté a besoin d'une bonne librairie, surtout maintenant que les gens s'intéressent davantage à l'apprentissage. À travers les fenêtres du café, ils ont vu une autre équipe de formation fédérale arriver à la conserverie. Le bâtiment qui avait autrefois abrité le programme d'armes biologiques des Riders est aujourd'hui une lueur d'espoir pour les communautés confrontées à des défis similaires. L'organisation du colonel a révélé quelque chose d'important, dit doucement Thomas. La corruption dépend de l'isolement, sur le fait que les gens se sentent impuissants. Il se tourne vers eux. Mais Millbrook Harbor a prouvé qu'il y avait une autre façon de faire. 3 mois après le raid qui a révélé l'existence des Crimson Riders, Thomas se tenait au Sarras Café, observant le lever du soleil sur le port de Millbrook depuis l'endroit même où il avait passé 12 ans à surveiller les menaces. Mais aujourd'hui, ses yeux attentifs voient quelque chose de différent. Une communauté transformée non seulement par ce qui s'est passé, mais aussi par ce qu'elle a appris à se protéger. Les chiffres définitifs des condamnations ont été communiqués par les autorités fédérales, a déclaré l'inspecteur Martinez, qui l'a rejoint à sa table habituelle. Toute la structure de commandement du colonel a été condamnée. Toutes les installations ont été démasquées. Chaque fonctionnaire corrompu identifié. Elle sourit légèrement. Vos preuves étaient parfaites. Pas une seule affaire perdue. À travers les fenêtres du café, ils peuvent voir l'ancienne conserverie où un nouveau groupe de stagiaires est en train d'arriver. Le bâtiment, qui avait autrefois abrité un empire criminel, servait désormais de centre de formation principal pour ce que l'on appelait le programme des gardiens de la communauté. Dernière mise à jour en provenance de Washington. Poursuit Lisa en consultant ses notes. 12 ports supplémentaires ont mis en œuvre vos méthodes. Les agences internationales adoptent les protocoles. La méthode Millbrook est en train de devenir la procédure standard pour les enquêtes sur la corruption, à long terme. Sarah apporte leur café du matin, mais ces jours-ci, elle se comporte différemment, plus alerte, plus consciente. Comme beaucoup d'autres membres de la communauté, elle a appris la valeur de l'observation des patients, de la reconnaissance de schémas que d'autres pourraient manquer. 2 autres villes ont demandé des conseils cette semaine, a-t-elle déclaré en posant leur tasse. Des chefs d'entreprise, des responsables locaux, des gens qui apprennent qu'ils n'ont pas à être des victimes, qu'ils peuvent se protéger s'ils travaillent ensemble. Qu'ils peuvent se protéger s'ils travaillent ensemble. Thomas accepte son café d'une main ferme qui n'a plus besoin de faire semblant. La leçon la plus importante n'est pas la surveillance, a-t-il noté à voix basse. C'est d'apprendre aux communautés qu'elles ont du pouvoir. Thunder, who had survived many forest fires in its years of solitary wandering, recognized the gravity of the situation immediately. The bear's behavior shifted from its usual calm demeanor to one of urgent purpose. Rather than fleeing to safety, alone as most large predators would, Thunder began moving through the valley with deliberate intent, using its massive form to guide smaller animals toward escape routes. Sierra and Ghost quickly understood Thunder's purpose and mobilized the Shadow Pack with remarkable efficiency. The wolves split into smaller groups, each led by experienced members like Storm and Shadow. Their mission wasn't to save themselves, but to orchestrate an evacuation of the entire valley community. Young Spark found himself guiding a group of deer fawns, his youthful energy helping to keep pace with their frightened bounds. The former Frostpack members, who had been learning the ways of cooperation, now had their chance to prove their transformation was genuine. They worked alongside their former rivals, helping to guide various animals toward safety. Their knowledge of the northern territories proved invaluable in identifying safe passages away from the fire's advance. But the greatest challenge lay with the injured elk herd, still not fully recovered from their wounds. These vulnerable animals, who had come to trust their unlikely protectors, now faced a terrifying choice between flight and flame. Thunder's response to this crisis would demonstrate just how far the evolution of wilderness behavior could reach. The massive bear positioned itself behind the elk herd, its presence providing both guidance and motivation. The wolves formed a coordinated escort formation, their movements synchronized to help control the herd's pace and direction. This unprecedented cooperation between traditional predators to protect their former prey created a sight that would have left any wildlife expert speechless. As they moved through the smoke-filled forest, other animals began to join their evacuation. Smaller predators like foxes and lynx, normally solitary and suspicious, fell into step with the organized retreat. They recognized that survival now depended on following this extraordinary alliance that had learned to transcend natural boundaries. The journey was treacherous. Burning branches crashed down around them, and the air grew thick with smoke and ash. Yet Thunder and the Shadow Pack maintained their focus on the collective survival of their community. When younger animals tired, the wolves would slow their pace. When panic threatened to scatter the group, Thunder's commanding presence would restore calm. Sierra discovered a series of shallow caves along a riverbank, offering temporary shelter from the approaching flames. The organization of the evacuation shifted to a new phase, with the wolves working in relay teams to guide different groups to these sanctuaries. Their coordination showed how far they had evolved beyond simple pack-hunting tactics. Young Spark found himself helping a group of wolf pups who had become separated from another pack during the chaos. His own recent experiences learning about cooperation made him the perfect guide for these young ones, teaching them about trust and teamwork even in the midst of crisis. Thunder's knowledge of the landscape proved crucial as the fire continued to spread. The bear led them to a series of natural fire breaks, areas where rocky outcrops and water features would help slow the inferno's advance. This wasn't just about escape. It was about finding a defensible position where their community could weather the storm. The night sky turned an eerie orange as the fire crowned through the treetops, but the assembled creatures maintained their remarkable calm under the guidance of their protectors. Ghost organized hunting parties to bring food to the sheltering animals, demonstrating that their commitment to protection extended beyond immediate rescue to ongoing care. A group of human firefighters, working to contain the blaze, stumbled upon this extraordinary scene. They found themselves witnessing something that defied everything known about wildlife behavior. Predator and prey species coexisting in close quarters, organized and calm despite the approaching danger. Their reports would later spark intense debate in scientific circles. The former Frostpack members proved their worth when they discovered an ancient tunnel system through the rocky hills, providing an additional escape route as the fire changed direction. Their integration into the community was now complete, their past rivalry forgotten in the face of collective challenge. Thunder's leadership during the crisis revealed new depths to the bear's intelligence. Each decision showed not just instinctual response to danger, but strategic thinking that considered the needs of the entire community. The bear's actions demonstrated that wilderness wisdom could encompass far more than individual survival. Sierra and Ghost's coordination of the wolf packs showcased how their leadership had evolved. They weren't just managing their own pack anymore, but orchestrating a complex operation involving multiple species and groups. Their success proved that cooperation could achieve what competition never could. The injured elk, despite their weakened condition, contributed to the community's survival by using their keen senses to detect changes in the fire's movement. Their participation showed how every member of the community, regardless of condition or species, had something valuable to offer. Storm and Shadow discovered that their hunting skills could be adapted for rescue work, using their knowledge of tracking and movement to locate and guide stranded animals to safety. This transformation of predatory skills into protective ones marked another milestone in their evolution. As dawn approached and the fire began to die down, the gathered creatures remained in their sanctuary, their unprecedented assembly a testament to the power of cooperative survival. The experience had forged bonds that would further strengthen their community, proving that crisis could lead to evolution. Thunder and the Shadow Pack's response to the wildfire had demonstrated something profound, that the true measure of strength lay not in the ability to dominate others, but in the capacity to protect and preserve life in all its forms. Their actions had written a new chapter in the story of wilderness behavior, one that would challenge scientific understanding for years to come. The human firefighters, before returning to their work, took photographs and videos of this remarkable gathering. Though they couldn't fully understand what they were seeing, they recognized that they were witnessing something extraordinary, a moment when the natural world revealed capabilities far beyond what humanity had imagined possible. In the aftermath of the wildfire, the hidden valley had transformed. Where once thick forest stood, now lay a mosaic of burned and untouched areas, creating an entirely new landscape that would test the adaptability of Thunder and the Shadow Pack's alliance. Yet from this devastation emerged an opportunity that would elevate their partnership to unprecedented heights. The first challenge came with the return migration. Animals that had fled the fire began making their way back, but the landscape they returned to required a complete reimagining of territorial boundaries and survival strategies. Thunder, drawing upon years of experience, recognized that this changed environment demanded new approaches to coexistence. Sierra and Ghost observed how the fire had created natural corridors through the forest, paths that could either divide their community or connect it in new ways. The decision they made would prove revolutionary. Instead of establishing traditional pack boundaries, they began marking routes that would encourage safe passage for all species through their territory. Young Spark discovered something remarkable. In one of the burned areas, new growth was already emerging, tender shoots pushing through the ash-covered soil. This discovery led to Thunder demonstrating another unexpected skill. The bear began carefully clearing areas around these new growths, creating protected spaces for the forest's renewal. The former Frost Pack members, now fully integrated into the community, brought valuable knowledge about fire ecology from their northern territories. They showed how certain burned areas would soon attract prey animals drawn to the nutrient-rich new growth, helping the community plan for future abundance rather than immediate scarcity. An extraordinary pattern began to emerge as the community worked together to restore their habitat. Different species naturally gravitated toward tasks suited to their abilities. Birds spread seeds from unburned areas into the ash-rich soil, while larger animals cleared paths through fallen trees. The wolves coordinated these efforts with an intelligence that spoke of their continued evolution. Thunder's presence took on a new dimension during this period of renewal. The bear began teaching the wolves about forest succession, how different plants would return in stages, and how this understanding could be used to support the entire ecosystem's recovery. This transmission of knowledge went far beyond what scientists believed possible for wild animals. One morning, Storm and Shadow made an unexpected discovery. A group of young bears had wandered into their territory, drawn by stories of the unique community that had formed there. Instead of seeing them as threats or competition, Thunder approached these newcomers as potential students, ready to share the wisdom of cooperation that had proven so successful. The Shadow Pack's response to these new bears demonstrated how far they had evolved from their original nature. Rather than defending territory, they helped integrate these newcomers into their community, creating hunting rotations that allowed all predators to thrive without depleting prey populations. Their system of cooperation expanded to encompass these new members with remarkable efficiency. Sierra's leadership proved crucial during this integration phase. She recognized that each new addition to their community brought both challenges and opportunities. Her ability to mediate between different species and groups showed that intelligence in the wild could evolve to encompass complex social dynamics previously thought impossible. The injured elk herd, now fully recovered, chose to establish permanent residence in the recovering valley. Their decision influenced other herds, creating a stable prey population that actually benefited from the presence of predators who had learned to hunt sustainably. This balance demonstrated how cooperation could create abundance that competition never could. Ghost's strategic thinking found new expression in the organization of their expanding community. He began establishing observation points throughout in their territory, staffed by rotating groups of different species working together to maintain the safety of all. This system of mutual protection proved more effective than traditional territorial defense. Young Spark, now maturing into a skilled mediator himself, found his role expanding as he helped integrate younger animals of various species into their community's way of life. His enthusiasm for cooperation proved contagious, spreading these new behaviors to the next generation of forest inhabitants. The human firefighters' documentation of their extraordinary community had unexpected consequences. Research teams began making regular observations from a respectful distance, their presence carefully monitored by Thunder and the Shadow Pack. The humans' amazement at what they witnessed would eventually lead to the establishment of a protected status for the entire area. As the forest began its recovery, the community's success attracted more attention from the surrounding wilderness. Animals that would normally compete fiercely for resources began approaching their territory with curiosity rather than aggression. Each new arrival brought opportunities to demonstrate and refine their system of cooperative survival. Thunder's modeling of protective behavior continued to influence all who encountered it. The bear's presence remained central to their community, not through dominance, but through the power of wisdom freely shared. This approach to leadership challenged everything known about hierarchical structures in wildlife communities. The Shadow Pack's hunting practices evolved further during this period of renewal. They developed sophisticated rotation systems that allowed prey populations to thrive while ensuring all predators were well fed. Their success proved that intelligence in wild animals could encompass complex resource management strategies. The valley's recovery became a testament to the power of cooperative effort. Areas that would have taken decades to regenerate showed remarkable renewal within seasons, thanks to the coordinated efforts of various species working together. Their success demonstrated that nature's resilience could be enhanced through conscious cooperation. The former Frost Pack members, once driven by aggression, had become some of the most dedicated advocates for their new way of life. Their transformation proved that even the most deeply ingrained behaviors could change when exposed to better alternatives. Their example inspired other wolves to question traditional pack dynamics. As the seasons progressed, their communities' influence began spreading beyond the valley's boundaries. Other animal groups began adopting aspects of their cooperative approach, creating a gradual shift in the behavior of wildlife throughout the region. What had begun as an extraordinary alliance between one bear and one wolf pack was evolving into a new template for wilderness existence. The human researchers' ongoing documentation of their community would eventually challenge fundamental assumptions about wildlife behavior and intelligence. Their observations would spark debates about animal consciousness and the potential for cross-species cooperation that would influence conservation efforts worldwide. Winter descended upon the valley with unprecedented severity, bringing challenges that would test the limits of Thunder and the Shadow Pack's revolutionary alliance. Temperatures plunged to record lows, and snow blanketed the landscape in depths that threatened even the most resilient creatures. Yet this harsh season would reveal the true power of their community's evolution. Thunder's foresight had prepared them for this trial. Throughout autumn, the bear had been teaching the wolves about food preservation techniques previously unknown to them. They had worked together to create caches of nuts and berries, stored in ways that would prevent spoilage. The wolves, in turn, had developed new hunting strategies that focused on creating emergency food reserves rather than immediate consumption. Sierra discovered that their community's diverse skills could be combined in ways never before seen. In the wild, the elk used their powerful bodies to clear paths through the deep snow, while smaller animals helped maintain the intricate network of tunnels beneath the snowpack. This cooperation created a complex system of winter survival that benefited all. Young Spark's role evolved during this harsh season. His agility and smaller size made him perfect for navigating the snow tunnels, and he became a crucial link in their community's communication network. He carried messages between different groups, helping coordinate their collective efforts to withstand the winter's fury. The newcomer bears, who had joined their community before winter, proved invaluable during this time. Their knowledge of winter survival techniques, combined with Thunder's leadership, created a robust support system that helped even the most vulnerable members of their community endure the brutal conditions. Ghost's strategic thinking found new expression in the organization of their winter activities. He established a rotation system where stronger animals would help maintain essential pathways and gathering areas, ensuring that no member of their community became isolated or trapped by the mounting snow. This coordinated effort demonstrated how their intelligence had evolved to encompass complex logistical planning. Storm and Shadow discovered that their hunting expertise could be adapted to create emergency rescue teams. When members of their community became trapped by sudden snowstorms or weakened by the cold, these skilled wolves would lead recovery missions, using their tracking abilities to locate and save those in danger. The former Frost Pack members found that their experience with harsh northern winters made them especially valuable to the community. They taught others how to find shelter in unexpected places and how to conserve energy during the coldest days. Their knowledge, freely shared, helped bridge the gap between different species' survival strategies. Thunder's presence during this challenging season took on an almost mythical quality. The bear's massive form would appear through the swirling snow, checking on different groups, teaching new survival techniques, and ensuring that their community's spirit remained unbroken by the relentless winter. The human researchers, observing from their distant posts, were astounded by what they witnessed. The level of cooperation and intelligence displayed by these wild animals defied every known principle of wildlife behavior. Their documentation would later revolutionize understanding of animal cognition and social structures. Sierra's leadership proved crucial in maintaining morale during the darkest days of winter. She organized social gatherings in the larger caves where different species would share warmth and company. These meetings strengthened the bonds between community members and helped prevent the isolation that often proved fatal during harsh winters. The injured elk herd, now fully integrated into the community, demonstrated how complete their transformation had been. Instead of seeking separate shelter, they worked alongside their former predators to maintain the common areas and protect weaker members of the group. Their behavior challenged every assumption about natural enemies. Young cubs and pups, born into the community that winter, learned behaviors that would have seemed impossible in the wild. They grew up seeing cooperation between species as natural, their development unencumbered by traditional boundaries and fears. Their play included members of different species, creating bonds that would last lifetimes. The valley's network of caves, maintained and improved through cooperative effort, became a model of winter survival. Different species shared these spaces, according to need rather than dominance, creating a fluid system of shelter that maximized everyone's chances of survival. This arrangement demonstrated how traditional territorial behaviors could evolve into something far more sophisticated. Thunder's teaching abilities reached new heights during this period. The bear began showing others how to read subtle signs in the weather, helping the community prepare for approaching storms. This transmission of knowledge across species boundaries showed how intelligence in the wild could transcend traditional limitations. Ghost's coordination of hunting parties evolved to include non-predator species in support roles. Prey animals would help locate food sources, while predators would ensure fair distribution of resources. This cooperative hunting system proved more efficient than traditional methods, ensuring better survival rates for the entire community. The winter's challenges brought out unprecedented levels of innovation among community members. Different species began combining their unique abilities in ways never before seen in the wild. Birds would scout ahead for hunting parties, while burrowing animals helped maintain underground food storage systems. The human researchers' presence had an unexpected effect on the community's development. The animals began to understand that they were being observed, and some even seemed to deliberately demonstrate their cooperative behaviors when humans were watching. This awareness showed levels of intelligence that challenged scientific understanding. As the winter deepened, the success of their cooperative approach became increasingly evident. While other areas reported high mortality rates among wildlife, their community maintained remarkable stability. Their methods of mutual support and resource sharing proved more effective than traditional survival strategies. The transformation of former rivals into cooperative partners continued to evolve during this challenging season. Animals that would normally compete fiercely for limited winter resources instead worked together to ensure everyone's survival. Their example began influencing wildlife behavior in surrounding territories. Thunder and the Shadow Pack's leadership during this winter crisis demonstrated something profound about the nature of intelligence in the wild. Their ability to coordinate complex cooperative efforts across species boundaries suggested levels of cognitive development previously thought impossible in non-human animals. Assistant. As winter began to loosen its grip on the valley, a new challenge emerged that would test the limits of Thunder and the Shadow Pack's revolutionary alliance. The harsh season had driven desperate predators from other territories into their region, including the infamous Blood Pack, a group of wolves known for their ruthless hunting tactics and complete disregard for the balance of nature. The Blood Pack's reputation preceded them like a dark cloud. Stories told of how they would destroy entire herds, killing far more than they needed, leaving devastation in their wake. Their approach to survival represented everything that Thunder and the Shadow Pack's community had evolved beyond pure aggression, without wisdom or foresight. Sierra was the first to detect signs of their approach. Her keen senses picked up subtle changes in the forest's rhythm, the unusual silence of birds, the nervous energy among the deer herds, the tension in the air that spoke of impending confrontation. She and Ghost quickly mobilized their community's defense network, putting into action plans they had developed but hoped never to use. Thunder's response to this threat revealed new depths to the bear's strategic thinking. Instead of preparing for direct confrontation, the massive creature began organizing their community in ways that would demonstrate their strength through unity rather than aggression. Each species was given a role that played to their natural abilities while contributing to their collective defense. Young Spark found himself at the center of an innovative communication system. His speed and agility made him perfect for coordinating between different groups, carrying messages and maintaining the flow of information that would prove crucial in the coming confrontation. His youthful energy had matured into focused purpose, showing how far he had evolved from the uncertain wolf who had first witnessed the Alliance's formation. The former Frost Pack members, now fully integrated into the community, brought valuable insight into the Blood Pack's tactics. Their experience with aggressive rivals helped the community prepare defensive strategies that would protect their most vulnerable members while demonstrating their unified strength. Storm and Shadow organized a series of demonstration exercises, showing how different species could work together to create an impressive display of coordinated movement. Their goal wasn't to prepare for violence, but rather to show potential adversaries the futility of attacking such a well-organized community. The Blood Pack's arrival came with the dawn, their forms materializing from the morning mist like dark spirits. Their leader, a scarred wolf called Razor, halted at the edge of the valley, clearly surprised by what he encountered. Instead of finding easy prey and isolated defenders, he faced an unprecedented sight. A unified community of different species, organized and ready. Thunder stood at the forefront of their assembly, the bear's massive form radiating power, tempered by wisdom. Behind and beside the bear, the Shadow Pack maintained perfect formation, while other species arranged themselves in ways that displayed their numbers and coordination. The message was clear. This was not a territory to be taken by force. Razor's initial response was predictable, a display of aggressive posturing meant to intimidate, but his tactics, which had worked countless times before, found no purchase here. The community held its ground, their unity unshaken by threats or shows of force. This was not the reaction the Blood Pack had encountered anywhere else in their violent history. Sierra stepped forward alongside Thunder, her presence adding another dimension to their display of leadership. The sight of wolf and bear standing together as equals, supported by an entire community of different species, created an image that challenged everything the Blood Pack understood about power and survival. The younger members of the Blood Pack showed the first signs of uncertainty. They had been raised on violence and dominance, but faced with this display of cooperative strength, their confidence began to waver. Some of them exchanged glances that spoke of growing doubt in their chosen path. Ghost's strategic positioning of their community members proved masterful. Each group was placed where they could best support the others, creating a living demonstration of how cooperation could produce strength far greater than any individual or single species could achieve. This display of coordinated power began to have a visible effect on the invaders. As the standoff continued, Thunder initiated something unprecedented. The bear began to demonstrate, through careful movements and deliberate gestures, how their community functioned. It was not a show of force, but rather an invitation to understand a better way of living. This display of teaching rather than threatening marked a revolutionary moment in wildlife behavior. The Blood Pack's younger members watched with increasing interest as Thunder and the Shadow Pack demonstrated their cooperative hunting techniques, their system of shared resources, and their methods of collective defense. These young wolves, who had never known anything but violence, were witnessing an alternative that challenged everything they had been taught. Razor's authority over his pack began to crumble as more of his followers showed interest in this new way of life. The Blood Pack's leader found himself facing not just external opposition, but internal dissolution, as his methods were exposed as unnecessarily brutal and ultimately less successful than the cooperative approach they were witnessing. Sierra recognized the moment of transformation and seized it with characteristic wisdom. She approached several of the younger Blood Pack members, her manner offering acceptance rather than confrontation. This gesture of inclusion, backed by the evident success of their community, proved more powerful than any display of force. The valley itself seemed to participate in this moment of change, its renewed landscape demonstrating the abundance that could be achieved through cooperation rather than competition. The Blood Pack members could see with their own eyes how this territory thrived, while others struggled, how different species coexisted in harmony while maintaining their natural strengths. Thunder's presence throughout this confrontation remained steady and purposeful, the bear's behavior demonstrating a level of intelligence that went far beyond instinct. This was conscious choice in action, the deliberate decision to offer transformation rather than engage in conflict. The impact of this approach proved far more effective than any physical confrontation could have been. Young Spark found himself connecting with wolves his own age from the Blood Pack, showing them through his own example how this new way of life had allowed him to grow beyond traditional limitations. His enthusiasm and evident happiness proved contagious, helping bridge the gap between old ways and new possibilities. The human researchers, observing from their posts, documented this extraordinary transformation with growing amazement. They were witnessing not just unusual animal behavior, but the active evolution of social structures in the wild. Their observations would challenge fundamental assumptions about wildlife intelligence and adaptation. As the day progressed, the confrontation evolved into something entirely different, a demonstration of possibility that offered hope even to those who had known only violence. The blood pack's unity began to dissolve, not through defeat, but through the recognition of a better way of living. Their transformation would add another chapter to the extraordinary story of Thunder and the Shadow Pack's revolution in wilderness behavior. This encounter proved that their community's strength lay not in their ability to fight, but in their power to transform others through example. They had faced one of their greatest challenges, not by meeting violence with violence, but by demonstrating a superior way of life that made aggression obsolete. Their success would continue to ripple through the wilderness, changing behaviors and challenging assumptions about what was possible in the natural world. As spring blossomed in the valley, Thunder and the Shadow Pack's community stood at the threshold of a new era. Their success in transforming the blood pack had rippled through the wilderness, drawing attention from far beyond their territory. The story of their revolutionary alliance had spread through the complex networks of wildlife communication, carried by migrating birds and wandering creatures, until it became almost legendary. The valley itself had transformed into something extraordinary, a living testament to the power of cooperation over competition. The winter's harsh lessons had strengthened their bonds, while their peaceful resolution with the blood pack had demonstrated the true potential of their approach. Now, as new life emerged with the changing season, their community prepared to share their wisdom with a wider world. Thunder's presence had evolved into something almost mythical among the forest creatures. The bear's massive form still commanded respect, but it was the wisdom behind those dark eyes that truly drew others to their territory. Young animals from various species would gather to learn from Thunder's example, creating an unprecedented school of wilderness wisdom where traditional boundaries held no meaning. Sierra and Ghost had become teachers in their own right, their leadership style inspiring other wolf packs to question traditional hierarchies. They demonstrated how authority could be based on wisdom rather than force, how leadership could nurture rather than dominate. Their example sparked a revolution in pack behavior that spread far beyond their valley. Young Spark, now fully grown but maintaining his youthful enthusiasm, had become an ambassador of their philosophy. His natural ability to connect with others made him perfect for welcoming newcomers and helping them understand their community's unique approach to survival. His joy in sharing their way of life proved infectious, making transformation seem not just possible, but natural. The former blood pack members who had chosen to stay had integrated seamlessly into their community, their transformation serving as powerful proof that even the most aggressive creatures could evolve beyond their violent past. They became some of the most passionate advocates for their cooperative approach, their personal journeys inspiring others to consider change. Storm and Shadow's hunting techniques had evolved into an art form that prioritized balance over mere success. They taught others how to hunt in ways that maintained the health of prey populations while ensuring everyone's needs were met. Their methods proved that predators could be guardians of the ecosystem rather than just consumers. The human researchers' presence had become a familiar part of their community's life. Though maintaining their distance, these observers had documented countless examples of intelligence and cooperation that challenged scientific understanding of wildlife behavior. Their work would eventually lead to new approaches in conservation that recognized and protected the complexity of animal societies. Thunder's teaching methods continued to evolve, showing depths of intelligence that amazed even those who had known the bear longest. The massive creature had developed ways to communicate complex ideas across species boundaries, creating a shared language of gesture and behavior that allowed for sophisticated cooperation. The valley's success had begun attracting attention from unexpected quarters. Other bear species, normally solitary and territorial, started visiting to observe their community's methods. Some chose to stay, adding new dimensions to their growing society and proving that even the most fundamental animal behaviors could evolve when better alternatives were demonstrated. Sierra's diplomatic skills proved crucial as their community's influence expanded. She had an innate ability to help different groups find common ground, to show how traditional enemies could become allies. Her patient approach to transformation helped ease the transition for newcomers who were still learning to trust ancient rivals. The forest itself seemed to respond to their revolutionary approach to coexistence. The balance they maintained through cooperative effort resulted in healthier ecosystems, richer biodiversity, and more stable populations of all species. Their territory became a model of how conscious cooperation could enhance rather than oppose natural processes. Ghost's strategic thinking found expression in the development of training methods that could be shared with other communities. He helped create ways to teach their cooperative approaches that could be adapted for different territories and situations. His work helped spread their revolution beyond the confines of their valley. The younger generation born into their community demonstrated how complete the transformation could be. Cubs and pups of different species played together freely, learning cooperation as naturally as breathing. Their behavior suggested that the traditional boundaries between species were learned rather than innate, offering hope for widespread change. Thunder's influence had begun to affect even the most solitary creatures. Normally reclusive animals like wolverines and lynx found themselves drawn to the community's success, discovering that selective cooperation could enhance rather than diminish their natural abilities. Their participation added new dimensions to the community's capabilities. The spring migration brought new opportunities to share their wisdom. Birds passing through their territory witnessed their success and carried stories to distant lands. Some chose to establish permanent residence in the valley, adding their aerial perspectives to the community's collective intelligence. The former, Frostpack members, who had been among the first to join their revolution, had become master teachers in their own right. Their experience with transformation made them especially effective at helping others overcome ingrained behaviors and fears. Their success stories provided powerful motivation for change. Young Spark's generation had begun developing new hunting techniques that incorporated the strengths of different species working together. Their innovations proved more efficient than traditional methods while maintaining the ethical standards their community had established. Their success demonstrated how cooperation could enhance natural abilities rather than suppress them. The human researchers' documentation of their community had begun influencing conservation policies worldwide. Their evidence of sophisticated cooperation between species challenged fundamental assumptions about wildlife management and led to new approaches that respected animal intelligence and social complexity. Thunder's presence in the valley had become a symbol of possibility, proof that intelligence and compassion could coexist with natural strength. The bear's example showed that true power lay not in domination, but in the ability to foster growth and understanding in others. This legacy would continue to influence wildlife behavior for generations to come. As spring fully established itself, their community stood as a living testament to the power of choosing cooperation over conflict, wisdom over force, and understanding over fear. Their success had not just changed their own lives, but had begun a revolution in wilderness behavior that would continue to spread, offering hope for a future where different species could coexist in harmony while maintaining their essential nature. The valley had become more than just a territory. It was now a beacon of possibility, showing that even in the wild, intelligence and compassion could triumph over ancient enmities. Thunder and the Shadowpack's alliance had evolved into something far greater than they had originally imagined, creating a new template for life in the wilderness that would inspire changes throughout the natural world. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.